Logan Fritz. My major is accounting. This is my first year in college, and I'm doing the persuasive speech for speech class. My persuasive speech is going to be on women having mandatory hysterectomies required by the government when they cannot afford their kids and have multiple kids on welfare. The reasoning behind this is we have multiple women abusing the system. They have 7 and 8 kids apiece, and all these kids are on welfare, and what do? They grow up and think that's what they do. That's what everybody does. So they do it. They have kids, and before long, the whole United States of America is going to be behind welfare, and we're going to have no government. The government will collapse because financially we won't be able to support it. I believe this because back in the day, in the 50s, people would have 13 kids apiece, you know. My parents are one of 7. They didn't use that back in the day, and the woman even got to stay home with the children. But the man worked, and they stayed in the relationship, and they made it work. They didn't get a divorce after a week. They didn't find a new man and have 7 kids by 7 different men like women these days. And it just makes our country look terrible because the other countries, France, Italy, the rich countries, they don't look like that. They don't have women that have multiple men. They don't have multiple kids by multiple men. I also believe this because our government would be in a better condition if we didn't have women having all these kids and having them all on welfare. Not only do they get free housing, they get their utilities paid, they get all the food paid, which could be up to $200 a child. They're getting $1,500 a month in food stamps. I don't even know that I would spend $1,500 a month in 6 months on food almost. You know, if you go to Aldi's, you use coupons, you can do it. It's not impossible. Also, I believe that these women should be cut off after, you know, 1 child. You know, if they can't afford that 1 child, that's fine. They get their 1 child, they can be on welfare. But after that child, if they can't afford their other children, it should be mandatory. If they want to continue to get assistance, they need to have a hysterectomy or some kind of birth control that we know they're taking, such as an implant they can't take out themselves, or a shot where they cannot get it out of their system, and it needs to be documented, and that doctor needs to fax it over to whoever's handling the food stamps and the social services office to make sure they're getting theirs. You know, they get their birth control shot, they can get their next dose of food stamps. It's still not fair to the rest of the working people that have jobs, because all they have to do to stay on food stamps is apply for 3 jobs a year. It doesn't matter if they get the job, how they dress when they go in. It's not like they could go in their pajamas and apply at McDonald's, and that would count as their 1 time. Who's going to get hired in the pajamas? Not sure, but they're also getting formula and all that free, which is, how can you not give it to them? Because if you don't give it to them, they're not going to feed their babies. So you have to give it to them. But then they get to sell it when they're done. They get so many cans a month, and then they're selling it on the internet. I see it on Facebook all the time, on bargain hunter websites, women selling their formula. They're making hundreds and hundreds of dollars on this formula. You know, I get it. They have to feed their baby because they're not feeding their baby if we don't give it to them. But when we do, they're making money off of it for their drugs, whatever else they want. That's not fair. They should have to turn it in or give it to somebody else in need. You know, somebody else may need that formula, or turn it back in. Help the government out, you know. If the government's helping you, you can help it. That's why the United States is in so much trouble these days, is because people are just using the system. And using the system isn't fair. It's not fair for the others, and there needs to be a limitation put somewhere. So if we put the mandatory hysterectomies on the women, then when they get the hysterectomies, they're not going to have all these other kids. But maybe give them, before they give the hysterectomy, let them get birth control for, let's say, 2 years. They get birth control for 2 years and they can't get a job in those 2 years, then they're going to get the hysterectomy so they get off of, they're not having more children and they're not making the government in more debt. If they get off and they get a job in the 2 years, don't make them get the birth control. You know, if they slowly get a job and they just need little to less assistance each month, then maybe they can have a different system where they can get actually off of the birth control and they can have another child if they're able to pay for themselves after 2 or so years. But this is how we get the U.S. government out of debt. And I know that this would come across as a religious thing in the United States because we have religious freedom. Religious freedom is the Catholics don't use birth controls, which they're going to, of course say that they're Catholic so they don't have to get on birth control, so that the government will keep paying for them and they'll have more children and more children and more children. But if the United States doesn't start putting the law down somewhere and having some sort of law or some sort of stipulation, it's going to keep going and going and going. That's why they need to lay the law down and they need to make this into effect so our government stops getting out of debt. Other countries don't give this much aid to people because the people have jobs, the people work, or the women are homemakers and they have gardens and they produce their own food and they have their own cattle and all that. And I know that there's a lot more than half of the people are in the city rather than the country these days, and that's kind of hard, but they can still have other time where they might put it on a friend's property, or people are willing. They have places in the community now where you can go and plant a garden and you can go tend to your garden. So if they're going and they're picking their vegetables, that's less stuff that they need for food stamps. Because on the food stamps they can go and they can get pop, they can get steak, they can get candy, they can get cookies, they can get all candy. They can get $1,500 worth of candy and sell it in the store. So these people know that they may be getting it and selling all this candy in the store and making money. There's all kinds of scams in the world, but if we can stop the women from having 7-8 kids by 7-8 different men, and all those kids being on welfare, which all those kids grow up knowing the system, then all those kids grow up with their children using the system, what's it going to be left? The United States is already giving all this money to other countries to aid in this, to aid in the tsunami, to aid in this war. The United States is so in debt that we need to get out of debt, and this would be the way to do mandatory tubals.